Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to be talking about my worst books of 2024. If you can tell that I'm enthusiastic, it's because I've already filmed this video, but my battery died and it for some reason didn't save what I had already filmed, despite the fact I only had 2 more books to talk about, so that was fun. The obvious disclaimer of if this is like your favorite book, if you love this book, that is good for you. I'm really glad that it worked for you. We're all have different tastes, different preferences. It's just words on a page. We're all friends here. It's chill. So let's just get into it. So number 10 is going to be The W of Oraro by K.S. Veloso. So this was actually one of the first books I think I read this year, and I did own it. I have unhauled it since, and I gave it 2 stars. And in fairness, I think actually I gave it 3 stars originally, but looking back on it, I think I was being nice because it was the debut. And like, I do think it is good for a debut, but that doesn't make it good full stop, you know? I definitely think in the future I could potentially be convinced to pick up a different K.S. Veloso book, but I'm not going to continue with this series. So we follow this woman, and she is the queen of this country, and she has a bit of a reputation because basically on the night of her coronation her husband left, and he hasn't been seen since, and they were supposed to be ruling together because there was this treaty in place, and it's years and years later, and she finally gets a message from her husband and he is asking her to meet, and she goes despite the fact it's an obvious trap. And here's the thing, I think actually a lot of this book, it's not bad. I think like the world building and the plot and kind of like the mystery involving it, I think a lot of that is like maybe not good, but it's grand. It's fine. I don't think there's anything exceptional, but I think it, as I said, it was really good for a debut. But the main problem lies in the characters, because the characters are extremely boring. All of the side characters, I can't even remember them. But our main character is an extremely frustrating and annoying character, and we are told that she is this particular way the entire way. We are told like the harsh conditions that she was raised in, so she had to grow up a fighter, and this and that, and she never once proves that this is actually true. She is constantly getting herself in trouble in stupid ways, and she is never able to fight back, and it just got very frustrating after a point of being constantly told how amazing she is and then her constantly proving that she is not. And as I said, it just got frustrating after a while. Then in spot number 9 is The Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. This is the 3rd book in the First Law trilogy. So this series, it follows 3 people. So it follows a torturer, an expert swordsman, and a Northman, and they are brought together by this magi, and he kind of sets a lot of events in motion. This last book, it felt like it was all leading up to nothing, which like I see a lot of people saying that is the point of it, like it's grimdark and like things aren't satisfying and all of this. I'm like, if that's what grimdark is, I don't want it, because it's extremely boring and unsatisfying. It's like, yeah, they're not the main characters because it's just life, and it's like, okay, so why am I reading about them? Because I didn't really care about the world building or the politics. Nothing in it stood out to me or really intrigued me or anything like that. But also, like, I just also didn't love the characters. And like, obviously, like, they're supposed to be like not the best people. But like, even then, I didn't even find them interesting. Like, they had, like, I think each of them had their moments where I was like, oh my god, I could really like this character and be really fascinated by them. 90% of the time I was extremely bored. So I give it 2 stars. I just don't care, and I'm not continuing with any Joe Abercrombie. So then book number 8 is going to be The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Sterling, and again this is another book which is mostly just I was bored. So we follow a woman and she is a caver, but she's actually not because she lied. And she goes on this expedition, and there is only one person in control of her and her suit and all her functions, and she quickly realizes that this may have been a mistake, and she doesn't know if the person controlling her is trustworthy. It was just such a repetitive book. It is not a very long book, and yet it was so extremely repetitive. It's supposed to be like science fiction and horror. I would say it's mostly science fiction. There is very little horror. I suppose maybe if you're claustrophobic, I could definitely see it affecting you then, but if you're not, it didn't really bother me at all. I didn't think that there was any sort of atmosphere or fear factor or anything like that. And the main thing is, like, this is such a repetitive and boring book for me because literally it's just the same thing that happens again and again and again until the end of the book. So our main character discovers something down in the cave. She realizes that the person controlling her is a bad person, can't be trusted, terrible, horrible, all of these things, freaks out about it. then she ends up talking to the person who is in control of her. And then she's like, okay, and trusts her again. Then she discovers something, freaks out about it, etc, etc, etc. And that just happens again and again and again. And so that makes a pretty boring book to me. So that is the reason why I didn't really like this one. It was a 2-star. And so then number 7, again, this is another book that just fits into the definition of I was extremely bored by this, and that is Sleeping Giants by Sylvian Nouvelle. And this is a story that is told in interview format, and we follow a woman who, when she was younger, actually fell into this like giant hand. And then obviously people want to know what this is, and it might potentially be like some sort of alien thing. And when she grows up, she becomes part of the research team, and we are just following the events of what happened. Not tell you, I can tell you one thing that happened in this book, and I actually can't tell you that because it's spoilers. But aside from that, I can't tell you any of the characters' names. I can't tell you anything about them. I was just so incredibly bored by all of it. I didn't care about the characters. They had no personalities to me, and I just didn't care about the research. I have actually discovered this year that I like those kind of like very like information heavy books, very formal and all of that. I've discovered that I really like that in fantasy, like, you know, Ladies of Emma Trent, Emily Wilde, all of those things where you're like getting like a very like scientific nearly look. I like these magical things. And like, so you would think that a sci-fi, like a scientific like interview process about this giant like robot thing would be interesting. How do you make that boring? And yes, he did. In 6th place, and I think the only book that I actually own, yeah, the only book that I still own, is Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon, because I'm never getting rid of this. This was a gift from Lizzie because she wanted me to read it, and I did. And I'm gonna leave you the video that I've read it in because I think past me probably says it better than present me. But this follows Georgie, and she is kidnapped by aliens, and then these aliens are bad aliens, and then they crash and they are on this ice planet, and then they get found by Ice Planet Barbarians who are good aliens. And the thing is, I thought going into this like it would be a kind of like a fun, silly, goofy time, and I would have fun with it. And like at first I did, but very quickly I started to have actual like real problems with it. Number one, it is like the first meeting is literally him essaying her, but it's fine because he was good at it. Okay, you're probably thinking, don't take it that seriously, it's a book about aliens. But I don't like that. I don't like it. Major ick. And also like he is very much, he's big and brooding and is very possessive. Major ick. And he also very much infantilizes our main character Georgie. Also major ick. Like he thinks she's completely incapable. And it just, again, I didn't like it. I didn't like the actual like alien plot, like these bad aliens, that never comes back around. It's just kind of left hanging there, which was very annoying. The actual romance plot, because like I guess the other aliens is kind of the sci-fi plot, bad aliens, but that doesn't go anywhere. The romance plot, the like one kind of major conflict I guess that they have is their communication issues, which is basically magically solved by this old computer. So that was very lazy to me. And then as I said, I just did not like them as a couple. I did not like him. I also did not like her. I thought she was extremely boring, and also like she was supposedly like the leader of this group despite only being there less than everyone else. She didn't even have the ability, like the implant that let her talk to the other aliens, so I don't know why she was the leader, because like she did not have any leadership qualities. Basically it wasn't as fun as I thought it would. And number 5 is going to be A Storm of Ice and Stars by Lisa Lodecki. So this is the prequel to A Shiver of Snow and Sky, and I think I gave A Shiver of Snow and Sky, I think I originally gave it 4 stars, but I later broke it down to 3 because I realized I actually didn't really care about the story, but I did really like the audiobook. Which is not a good enough reason to give a book 4 stars, except sometimes it is. Mostly because it was boring. Like if you really love the first book, I would say wait a year and then read this one, and then you will probably really love this one. But because I didn't love the first one, and then this one I read basically nearly right after, and it was just basically the exact same thing. Since I didn't love the first one, I didn't love this one, and since I read them so close together, they were just so extremely similar that I was even more bored by this one than I was by the first one. The main characters are extremely similar. It's like they're both like outcasts and all of this, and like there's slightly different reasons why, and they like both have like very traumatic backstories, slightly different traumatic backstories. I just feel like in this book we didn't really get hers developed. Like we kind of understood, like obviously it was terrible what was happening to the girl in the first book, but like we kind of understood it. Whereas in this one, like, we don't really understand it. I don't think we ever really get a full explanation of why this is what it is. But the red sky happens. It means that something bad is going to happen to this village. And both our characters basically set off to stop it. Because we know what happens in the first book, nothing in this book is a surprise. We know what's going to happen. And as I said, because it's so similar, it just felt extremely repetitive to me. I was very bored. And like in the first book, I really liked one side character. Like, I really liked him. And he kind of like saved the book for me. Whereas in this one, we didn't even have any like cool, interesting side characters to save it for me. So it was very boring for me, so I gave it 2 stars. And so then we get into Hench. And Hench is probably the book that I actually have the most to say about. I actually wrote a full review for this because I disliked it that much. It was extremely frustrating to me. So we follow our main character, and she is a hench. And so it's just a normal 9-to-5 job. She gets paid basically to pretend to be backup. But she's not actually a bad person, except she's a terrible person, but we'll get into that. And she gets injured in one of these fights by one of the heroes, and she then starts this thing called the Injury Project, where she starts researching how much the damage the heroes cause. And it's supposed to be a villain origin story, but I would just say it is the world's most annoying person's origin story. The reason why this is a 2-star instead of a 1-star is because I did actually really enjoy like the first very small portion of it, because I was very intrigued by like kind of just like the satirical way that the author dealt with like hench as a job. Like, it's just a normal job, and just the way it was written was very fun to me. And then I also really enjoyed the start of the Injury Project and like her obsession with this, and how like it kind of just overtook her life, and like the introduction to, of that as a topic. But the book then takes a different turn, because I thought it would be basically her against the world, trying to prove that these good guys aren't that good. But instead, she actually gets a job from a villain and basically becomes a villain herself. And that's where my problem comes in, is like her having all of these people and all of this. So, number one, she is a bad character. And like, I don't just mean as in like, obviously it's a villain origin story. I don't expect her to be a good person. But she is a bad friend. She lacks complete self-awareness. I just absolutely could not stand her. I also had some issues with the writing. As I said, I didn't hate it at first. Like, there was definitely some humor in there where I was like, it's very millennial. Like, I need my coffee and my wine. And that doesn't really work for me, which is fine. Humor is subjective. But like, that kind of continued, like that quirky kind of writing style. And it just did not work for me. Which again is fine. Nobody in this book is worth cheering for. The heroes and the villains are all terrible. And the side characters, they have no personality. Nobody has any personality, except they all just like have a job to do and don't have a personality. And then our main character, as I said, she's frustrating. She lacks awareness. There's also this really strange and uncomfortable relationship that she has with her boss. And like, at first I thought maybe the author is actually just really smart. And like, this is her whole point, is that like the character lacks self-awareness. But like, nobody ever questions it in the story, and so I find it very hard to believe that that is actually what is happening. Because if like one side character has been like, are you sure about this? Or like, but if you do this, this means this, then I would have been like, oh, the author does actually understand that the character is like kind of an idiot. But that never happened. Nobody ever questioned anything, and so it's just framed as like, yes, this character is right in what she's thinking. So like, basically everything that she does, she blames on the villains. On the good guys. Because so like, she will like set up a confrontation. Like, she will plan it. Someone will get hurt and she'll go, I can't believe the heroes made me do this. And it's just, take the tiniest little bit of responsibility for your own actions. Like, no, you cannot blame the heroes for making you a villain. Like, that is so pathetic. My biggest overall complaint is like, it is such a surface level discussion on the value of a human life. Because obviously her own math is definitely flawed by her own confirmation bias. We never actually get a true discussion. Like, we get a discussion on the years that the heroes have taken away from people, but we never get a discussion on the years that the villains have taken away. I wonder why that is. what could that possibly be? Because maybe they are also terrible people who are also causing more harm than the heroes. And also never included in her maths, she never includes how much life the heroes save. How many years, like, does that cancel each other out? Like, it's never done. But also, it's only ever permanent injury or death. It's never actually talked about the mental health consequences. Because, like, obviously we all know that, like, someone with extreme trauma, like, you know, the book starts with a child being kidnapped and ransomed and threatening to cut their fingers off. You don't think that that could potentially, like, affect the child's lifespan because they're extremely traumatized by this event? Like, it's never any discussion on, like, the mental health effects. And because, like, that doesn't matter. Because they're all alive, it doesn't matter, right? Like, she encouraged an abusive man to stalk his ex. Like, she planted seeds so he could find this information on her, despite the fact she's hiding from him. But it's fine because she's alive. And no, it's not. You're causing her unnecessary stress. But that doesn't matter because it's not years off of life, because she's a hypocrite, and there's nothing I hate more than a hypocrite. Book number 3 is going to be Satan's Affair by H.G. Carlton. What was this? Cassidy made me read it. I did a reading vlog where I read dark romances, and she made me read this because I had to read it before a book that I'll be talking about in a second. And it follows this woman, and she is part of, like, this, like, creepy haunted house attraction. And it's basically erotica. It's horror erotica because there's violent things happening, but also a lot of, you know. And that, it's so strange. And, like, yeah, I guess there's a twist at the end, but, like, you can kind of see the twist coming. And it's basically just a scene that is in Haunting Adeline, but from her a different point of view. And yeah, it's weird. So those are all my 2 stars. So I have 2 1-star books of the year. So book number 2, my second worst book of the year, is going to be The Unmaking of June Fire, which was a late addition to this. So congrats for just making the cut. So this is by Adrienne Young, and I have read from Adrienne Young before. I read Fable, and I also gave that 1 star. So yeah, I just don't think Adrienne Young is the author for me, but I was reading all the Goodreads fantasy books, and this made the top 10, so I read it, and I did not like it at all. So it follows a woman, and she, her family is, like, has some sort of weird curse or sickness or whatever, because people, they all either go missing or they go mad or something like that. And she thinks that it is beginning to happen to her, walks through a door, and she discovers that maybe there's more at play. And again, I don't think I can actually say much about this because of spoilers, but I will leave the Goodreads video link down below because I actually go into spoilers. I have it all bookmarked, so if you just want to hear me talk about this book, you can go there. If you want to hear me talk about spoilers, you can go there. Because my main problems with this are spoilery, but I think it might be one of my most liked Goodreads reviews because I have, like, it's gotten a good few likes, but, like, the Goodreads review literally just says, "You've heard of miscommunication. Now introducing no communication, the book." And that is basically all I can say about this. Like, that is what this story is. Nobody in this woman's life has ever told her anything. And it's very frustrating. Like, because it's not, like, it's literally just to create conflict in the book. Because there's no actual reasonable explanation as to why. Like, because, like, if you actually think about it for a second, you're not protecting because you're putting them in more danger by not telling them this thing. Or you're causing them stress by not telling them this thing. Or you're, like, there's basically time and time again, like, her family is terrible. So yeah, I did not like it. I did not like the writing. I don't think Adrienne Young's writing is for me whatsoever. It just doesn't work for me. Without spoiling stuff, there's a big conversation about the 50s in here. And I think it very much romanticizes the 50s. As, like, and I just don't think, like, in the author's note, it implies that she thinks that she did a good job talking about, like, the racism and sexism and all of the isms of the time, when no, that does not happen at all. I don't know where you've gotten that idea from, because it just isn't talked about. my first 1-star of the year and my absolute worst book of this year was Haunting Adeline by H.T. Carlton. This is an absolute terrible book. I do not understand why people like it so much. It is not hot. It is horrible. It is terrible. It is full of SA. It is full of stalking, and it is absolutely romanticized, and it is so weird. And I think, obviously, I will leave the dark romance reading log link down below. But basically, I kind of came to the conclusion in that book is like, I think I don't necessarily hate dark romance, but I hate when the dark romance involves like, you know, dark evil person with another person. But like, for example, I read Steel Beating in that, and I really like that book. But that is like 2 characters, and very bad dark things happen to the 2 of them, but they are not doing bad things to each other. Whereas in this, that is absolutely not the case. Our main character, she is like basically just a normal person. She moves into this house and she ends up with a stalker, and he is the love interest, and he's a terrible person and he does terrible things to her. And I think it is trying to like, well, it's okay because he's a good person in every other thing, because like he is like stopping this human trafficking ring, so it makes it okay that he is stalking and SAing her. Okay. And I think there was a lot of things that happened in here that I just absolutely could not stand. The writing was terrible. It was really bad. And I also think I had a big problem with the discussion of like trauma in here, because it was very much, there was a line in here and it was very much like, well, it's probably better for her to die because she'd be traumatized by this. And I think that is such a horrible way of thinking. Like, terrible things happen to people. There's a lot of people who like terrible things happen and they do feel like that, but like some people, they get better. Like, obviously things, you know, will never be the same, but they can recover from it. They can have a life. And I already was not having a good time. I already thought the writing was terrible. I already hated the romance between them. And this, I was just like the final nail in the coffin. I think it was about 70% in, but I very much almost DNF'd the book right there, because they just, how callous can you be? Like, this is people we're talking about. Like, I know they're fictional, but like things like this do happen in real life. And yeah, I just really didn't like it. Like I said, most of them actually, they weren't necessarily, this is a bad book. A lot of them were just, it just didn't work for me for whatever reason. I just didn't like connect to the characters or the story, and so I was just bored. So like, a lot of them I can definitely see potentially why people would be interested in, but there is definitely a couple that I just like, I don't understand. I don't understand. But yeah, so I do hope you enjoyed, and I hope I didn't hurt anyone's feelings. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.